Hi guys, it is April from Getting Hogo With It. Today I'm here to share with you the books that I've read that have really surprised me. Where I've gone into reading these books thinking I'm just gonna give it a chance, I'm probably gonna hate it, and then they've turned out to be amazing books. Like some of these are my favorite books. I love it when a book blows you away that way, so let's get into it. First up, I want to share The Great Gatsby with you. I read this in high school and I really hated it in high school. I remember just being so bored and not interested in any of the characters. And then I went to university. I grew up a little bit and I read this again from an American literature class at Queen's, which was so good. I had the best prof for that class. It was amazing. Anyway, we read The Great Gatsby and it quickly became like one of my favorite books of all time. So isn't it crazy how just a little bit of time can change your mind about a book? I love that. I love that it says so much about how we grow. And anyway, so yeah, love The Great Gatsby. Who would have thought? You know, another book that I remember putting off for not quite years, but months, was The Light Between Oceans, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I remember that I got it out from the library and I picked it up and I started reading it and I was like, this is not the book for me at this time and I don't know if I'm gonna like it at all. It was at the very beginning of my relationship with Barry when we were trying to conceive at the very, very start. I didn't want to read about infertility, and I can understand that, but about a year later, when we still hadn't conceived, I picked that book up and I spent a lot of time crying, and I just felt like I was understood. That desire to be a mom, I really saw myself in Isabel. I don't condone all of the things that she did, but I understood her, and it was it's one of my favorite books that shows gray and how every situation has a lot of gray in it. So I absolutely loved The Light Between Oceans in the end. Okay, so The Martian. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, and so I knew that this was coming out as a movie and I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie, but I also was giving myself full permission to DNF this because it's sci-fi and I don't read a lot of it, and I was really nervous going into reading The Martian and I ended up absolutely loving it. And so yeah, this follows a man named Mark Watney, who is like one of the most fun and snarky characters you'll ever read, and he gets trapped on Mars. He's on a mission with other astronauts, and he gets hit by something in a sandstorm, and they leave him behind thinking that he was dead. He was still alive, and it's about his attempt to survive, which I thought it was hilarious in the end, and it was really easy to flip through pages in this book, so loved The Martian. Now, I don't know what it is about Cameron Diaz, but in the past, I really not liked her. Like, really, really not liked her. And one day I was at Chapters, I think, and I was just kind of flipping through her book, The Body Book, and I really liked it. I actually want to read this all over again this year over the course of 2019. I really liked it. It was real and honest and really informative, and I ended up loving it so much that I went out and got Longevity, The Science of Aging, also by Cameron Diaz, and yeah, I've kind of like her now. I don't know why I didn't like her before, but I was like very hesitant to read those books, and then once I picked them up, I was really impressed and I really, really enjoyed them. So there's that. I was also entirely shocked that I liked Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I read Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, and I didn't like that book. Like, I really found it incredibly frustrating. Now, Celeste Ng does write about characters and relationships that are frustrating. I was frustrated reading this book, but not the same way as Everything I Never Told You. I ended up loving this book about a little town called Shaker Heights. We have a single mother who moves in and a woman named Mrs. Richardson who'd always lived there, and they clash in a big way. And it affects both of their children, it affects their friends, and I loved this book. This book kind of taught me that yes, you might not like one book by an author, but you should probably give them another shot. So it depends. It depends. Like Philippa Gregory, I read, I think, one book by her, and I just didn't like the writing style. Stephen King is another one where I don't like the writing style. So I don't think it applies for all authors for me, but it definitely applies for Celeste Ng. So there is that. I also really ended up liking Longbourn by Jo Baker. This is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and I am definitely hesitant about retellings of Pride and Prejudice. I really struggle with them. They're okay in the movies for me for some reason, but in book form, I'm like, why are you trying to take something beloved and screw around with it? But I ended up really enjoying Longbourn, and maybe it's because it's not retelling really the main characters in that book. We're not really following Elizabeth. We're following all of the servants that lived in Longbourn with Elizabeth, with Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. We're following them and their lives, and I really enjoyed doing that. It's very like Downton Abbey-esque, where you're following, you're mostly following the servants, but you have little glimpses of the people who own the home and their family, and I really liked it. Okay, so The Vegetarian. The Vegetarian is a book that I was so intimidated by when I picked it up. It is very short. It wasn't intimidating in terms of its length or anything, but I honestly picked it up going, I don't know if I'm smart enough for this. And that sounds terrible. I like myself a heck of a lot more than that, but when you pick up a book and you're like, is this just going to be beyond me? I'm not sure. I had that with The Vegetarian, and then I picked it up and loved every single second of it. I found that book so fascinating. I need to read more by that author. She has written, I think, 3 or 4 books that have been translated, and I'd really like to dive back into her writing because it's very different. I've never read anything like The Vegetarian before. Now, Every Heart a Doorway, as you can imagine, I was very hesitant going into this because it's YA. If you've been watching my channel for a while, I struggle with YA for some reason. I wish that I didn't. There are so many YouTube channels that, read a lot of YA, and I feel like I'm probably missing out on all of them because I rarely pick up YA. But Every Heart a Doorway I really enjoyed, where you're following a group of kids who've gone off to different worlds, Neverland, Wonderland, what have you land, and they come back to Earth, to this world, and they're like, oh, I prefer the other one. Most of them prefer the cool world that they had just left. And they all come together and live at a school, essentially, because their parents don't know what to do with them, so they send them to the school, and it is about the events of moving to the school. And I really enjoyed Every Heart a Doorway for sure. And this series is quite long. It's going to be, I think, 8 or 9 books. I've read 3 of them, loved 2, didn't like the 3rd, but it gives me hope for YA and me. Okay, so one of my favorite books of all time, Life After Life. This follows a woman who is born and then dies, and is born and dies, and we follow her many different lives. If she went down this path, she would live. If she went down that path, she would die. And I thought going into this book that I was gonna hate that, like the multiple lives. I really have never got on well with time travel. This isn't time travel, but it's something kind of similar, where we're working with time, and I was very afraid. I had no reason to be afraid. Kate Atkinson is a masterful storyteller. This helped me in my personal life, to just, you know, really accept that life is random, and I felt so much comfort reading this. It's so immersive. I just loved it in the end. And I really didn't expect to do that. But there's that. I also read The Exorcist, and I ended up really liking it. I think the reason that I thought I wasn't going to really love The Exorcist is that it's a little bit corny. I don't know, like some horror movies can be a little bit corny, and I know at the time of The Exorcist, when it came out, I think in the 70s, it was like horrifying to people. And I still enjoy that movie, but I'm not overly scared watching it. The idea of it is scary, but watching it isn't overly scary. And so I thought I would feel the same way about the book, but the book really did scare me in certain spots. Any scenes with Reagan, who is possessed by a demon, they all really scared me. Now, I will say the mom is incredibly annoying, much more annoying in the book than in the movie. I don't know why, but Blady wrote her very strangely, and she kept saying things like, "What doing?" When, like, her daughter is being possessed, and she's coming in asking her maid, like, "What doing?" Like, who says that? Anyway, she was annoying. But all of the scenes with Reagan really made up for that, and I do recommend it. It's a good book for, like, Halloween. So there's that. Okay, so the last book that I really didn't expect to like as much as I did is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, and I'll tell you why. I picked this up years ago, and I started reading it, and I got bored. And I got bored because nothing scary happens in the first 100 pages. This is like 450-ish pages, and nothing scary happens in the first 100 pages, I'm sorry to tell you. And I wasn't patient enough to wait it out when I was younger. And I think I got rid of that copy, and I luckily found this copy, which I think is really beautiful. And then I picked it up, stayed the course through that 100 pages, which is really setting the scene. She did that because you needed to invest in the characters. You needed to have an understanding of the class system and the crumbling of the upper class, and how deeply that affects these characters who live in this mansion that's crumbling around them. You needed to know all of that and know they were kind of trapped to understand how horrifying it would be to be trapped in a home like that and then find out it's haunted. So I totally understand it now. I'm sorry, Sarah Waters, that I didn't read it before, but I'm so glad that I ended up reading it and loving it. So yeah, those are the books that really surprised me, that I didn't expect great things. Like, I was going in fully well prepared to DNF, and then they ended up being absolutely fantastic. Let me know in the comments below if that has happened to you. I'm assuming I'm not the only one who's gone into a book going, we'll see, and then have been pleasantly surprised. What is that book for you, or books? I'd love to know, and I will see you next time. All right, bye.